Hey guys, it's Matthew, and today I'd like to show you how I'm going to repot one of my Amaryllis bulbs. I've been growing Amaryllis for quite a few years now, and I have one here that's called Nymph. I got back in 2017, December 2017, and it is ready to be repotted. It is January of 2020, and it's getting ready to send up a new flower spike. It's been in dormancy since September, and it has a few new little offshoots that are coming up, so I'm going to separate those from the mother bulb. Eventually I want to have all of them together in the same pot. That's why I chose such a large pot, although I like to grow all of my bulbs in fairly large pots. But I think I might separate those out and let those have their own pots until they get a little bit larger, and then add them to this one. So we'll see. I'm going to go and wet this with the hose. Fortunately, it's unusually warm here in Indiana for January, so I'm able to do all of this outside today. Usually this would be something that I would have to do inside. So I'm going to go wet this, get all the old soil off, and see what kind of roots we have, and get it potted up in the new pot. Alright, so I got all the old soil off, and I'm glad I did because it was really packed in there. And some people like to do this before they put their bulbs in storage. I have found that, so I don't. I always keep them in the pots, in the soil. I keep them upright. Some people tip them over with the idea that that will help keep water from pooling inside the top of the bulb and prevent rotting, but I've never had a problem with that. I always let my bulbs dry, the soil dry out completely before I put them into storage. If you remove the bulbs from their soil before you put them into storage, then the roots are exposed to the air all winter and will dry out and shrivel. So if you notice, all of the roots, most of them, some of them are old, the really small ones are old and dried out, but all the big ones are all still really nice and healthy and hydrated. So the bulb already goes into its growing cycle with really nice, healthy, fresh roots, and it will continue to produce new roots from the basal plate, which is on the bottom of the bulb, and that's where all the roots grow from. So before I repot this, I want to separate the babies, the little offshoots, and these two there's three. So I knew that there were the two larger ones, and there's a smaller one down underneath, although I don't think it produced any leaves last year, so this is a brand new one. I'm going to leave that attached and let it develop a little bit longer, a little bit more, let it get a little bit bigger before I separate it from the mother bulb. But I want to go ahead and take these two off, and they're big enough, they should just they're already loose, and they should just come off. They already have root systems of their own. Oh, there's even a fourth one down in there. There's a really little one. So let's see if I can just kind of wiggle those. I don't think I'm going to need a knife. The roots are a little bit tangled. Yeah, that's going to just pull off. I think that big one's already separated. Okay, so I'm going to work with this just a little bit more and show you how they are once they're separated here. Let's see. Oh, that one's coming out. There we go. Yep, that one was already completely detached from the mother bulb. Has its own root system. There it comes. So that'll go in a smaller pot. I think I'm going to put both of these in a pot together. So the reason why I'm going to put them in a pot of their own instead of putting them in the big pot with the mother bulb is because I'm going to continue each year to let the mother bulb go dormant in the winter. And oh, that one was still attached, but it snapped off very cleanly, and it has several new roots. So I'm going to keep the mother bulb in the big pot so it can go dormant because it's already blooming size. The smaller bulbs aren't blooming size, so what I want to do is I'm probably not going to let them go dormant or if they do go dormant, I want them to go dormant on their own so that they grow as much as possible. So in the fall, when it gets too cold for them outside, I'll bring them in and just continue to grow them under some grow lights inside so they can continue to get larger quicker, because they won't bloom until they get big enough. And from my experience, the smaller offsets, if you keep putting them through a dormant period before they're big enough to grow, that just, they go through about 3 months of dormancy approximately. So that's 3 months of non-growing time each year, and it might take them 2 to 3 years, maybe 4, to get blooming size. So you're just postponing that process of getting to the blooming size longer if you put them through dormancy. So I'm going to keep those out, put them in their own pot. And this is a really too big of a pot for this, but maybe we'll see next year. Maybe these will grow significantly bigger and I'll be able to put them in this one. So we'll see. But this bulb was larger when I first received it. I'm going to take off some of the older brown layers here, and I did hose it off, so the water got in between these, so I'm going to take some of these off. It's not necessary if you get, like, if you buy a bulb, a brand new bulb, and it has the brown dry layers, you can just leave those on. That's not a problem. So this is going to be similar to what you might get if you buy a new bulb, a dormant bulb, for Christmas, and it's ready to bloom. But if you buy a dormant bulb, it will probably, more than likely, not have all of these roots. Most likely it won't have any roots at all. If it does, it'll have just a few roots, and they'll probably be dry and shriveled. And at that time, you'll definitely need to probably plan on staking the flowers, the flower scape that comes up, because there won't be roots to anchor the bulb. Once you have a bulb in a pot, and that's also another reason why I like to let them grow or go dormant in their pot, in their soil, because they're already anchored. And if they're anchored but through the root system, once the tall, heavy flower scape comes up, it won't tip over. You still might have to stake it, just because it might want to lean toward the light if you put your bulbs close to a window, but it's not gonna, the bulb won't tip over as easily. So also what I like to do, I use terracotta pots often. I have several that have broken over the years, so I save all the shards, and I'll use the shards to cover the hole in the pot. This has a drainage hole, so I'm going to just cover the drainage hole, and I'll fill this up, and then I'll show you how to pot the bulb once I have this all full. Alright, so the pot is mostly full with potting soil, and I just like to use an all-purpose Miracle-Gro. I know some people don't like Miracle-Gro. Just use whatever you prefer. I have used, what's the other one that I've used? Pro Mix. That's pretty good. I've never had a problem with the Miracle-Gro potting mix, and it is a potting mix, not a topsoil. So you want to make sure that it's good, has good drainage. Also, when you buy some of the kits that come with a pot, a smaller pot, the pot will be very small, and it usually doesn't have drainage at all. You have to have drainage in your pot if you want the amaryllis to be something that you're going to keep for several years. You have to have good drainage. They will rot without it. So I was going to take off what appeared to be dead roots, but most of these, I think, after they've kind of hydrated a little bit, very few of them are dead. The vast majority of them are alive. So you have the big roots. Let's see. Some of these, here's one. You have the big root, and then you have a thin root there, if you can see that, that comes off of the big root. So a lot of the small roots that initially I thought were dried, old dried roots, are all seem to be fine. So very few dried out roots. So those are all good. So if you were to just let your bulbs dry out outside of a pot go dormant. Outside of a pot, you take all the soil off. All of those nice roots would just dry out, and you would not have those. So that will give this bulb a really nice head start to be able to absorb water. We'll shoot that the flower scape even quicker, and it'll probably start producing leaves even quicker too. So it'll get the bulb growing really fast. So I didn't fill it up completely yet because I want to have room to be able to kind of move the soil around. So what I'm going to do, the roots grow out around the basal plate. If you look inside, you can see that there's nothing growing in the center. So what you want to do in this situation where you already have a lot of roots is you want to kind of mound up the soil in the center and make a little trench around that. So you know what, I think I put too much in there. I'm going to take a little bit out because I want that to set. And you don't want to put the bulbs too deep. They need to be fairly high, almost sitting on the top of the soil. And I usually will put them up just sitting right on top because they will settle after some time, and they will it gives you a little bit of room to add some more soil later on if you need it. So I'm going to mound up the soil here in the center pretty high, because that's going to pack down. That's still very light and airy. It will settle quite a bit. So I'm going to spread those roots out. And we're just going to set that right on top of that little mound, and then I'm going to try to evenly space those roots out around in the pot. And see, that's sitting very high. That's too high, but what's going to happen is we can kind of settle that down in there. See how much lower that went down in there pretty quick. Okay, so that looks good. And then I'm going to fill in around, covering those roots with more potting mix. Just keep going around. So I called this, I've been referring to this as an amaryllis bulb. So here in the United States, we often, most people know these as amaryllis. They are, from what I understand technically, they are called Hippeastrum bulbs. So if you talk to someone who's really into it, you might get into a little bit of a debate on what they're called. True amaryllis bulbs are a little bit different, and I'm still learning a little bit about that. That's something that's relatively new to me. So I need to research that myself as far as how to tell. How do you know which are true amaryllis and which ones are the Hippeastrums? There's a little bit of a visual difference, but not a whole lot. It has to do a good bit, I believe, from what part of the world they are from. So that looks pretty good. Now what I'm going to do, and I like to fill my pots for the most part all the way up, and since I'm outside, I'll water this in with the hose, and that will settle significantly. I might need to end up putting a little bit more soil in that, but so then we'll water it once, and the roots will take up a good bit of water. And since it already has roots, as the soil dries out a little bit, I can water it again. I may not water this for probably maybe 2 weeks. Of course, there's a lot of soil in this, so it'll take quite a bit of time to dry out. And it's a glazed pot. If it were a terracotta pot, the terracotta will wick the water out and evaporate more quickly. The glazed pot will keep the moisture in longer, so it won't dry out as fast. So I'm going to set this aside, and we'll go ahead and do the same thing with the other two little babies. So I have a significantly smaller pot, and as you can see, this is terracotta. I have my little shard I'm going to use to cover up the hole with. Same thing, I'm just going to fill this, although I'm probably not going to fill it. I'll just put 1 scoop of potting mix in there, because I'm not going to necessarily do the mound with these. Take off some of that dried layer. And these already have some leaves coming up, which is good. That means they're ready to grow. Let's see, yeah, I think this one, I'm going to take off that single outer layer because it is pretty wet now from rinsing them. And if you do that, if you do take the outer layer off and expose the fresher white layer underneath, it won't take too long for that exposed layer to also turn brown and papery, which is normal. That's perfectly normal. So each set of leaves will create a new layer of the bulb, just like, say, like an onion. If you cut an onion, and you can see all those different layers. The leaves always grow from the center, the very center. And if you notice on this one, you can see the flower scape is coming up from the side. So we have the very center here, which is where the leaves will come up from, and the flower scapes always come out from one side of the or the other from the center of the bulb. So remember that. So these I'm just going to kind of put in here because they are smaller, and again, I do want them to set pretty high. Let's see, so let's put this one down in there. These I'll probably end up repotting again this year. I just happen to have, this is just a pot that I happen to have that was empty and ready to be reused. Sometimes if they, so I just kind of let them flop down in there, put some soil in, and then I'm just going to kind of pick them up, wiggle them to get the soil in down around the roots and raised up a little bit more in the pot. So it's nice having this great weather to be able to do this outside, because this is quite the chore to try to do in the house. I can use the hose today, which is not something that I would be able to do in the house. And I do want these significantly high in the pot. Now I do like to leave, if you fill the pot without packing it down all the way to the top, it will settle enough where you will have enough room for water. But I like to leave enough room between the soil and the rim of the pot to allow for some water when you water. You don't want the water to just go all over the edge of the pot. So there we go. I will water those in with the hose, and they will be set. I'll put those in a warm, hopefully fairly sunny spot in the house. These I'll probably actually take and put these directly under some of my grow lights that I have, some of my other plants. I grow a lot of orchids, so these will probably go on the shelf with my orchids so they can just get growing quickly. The faster they grow, the sooner they'll bloom. So that's the key to these. I don't know, these, depending on how fast these grow, these might stay in this pot till next year, so we'll see. Hopefully I can keep you updated on these as they go, and especially this one will be not too exciting because it'll just be leaves, but this one once it starts growing, we'll have some great flowers. Hopefully, I don't know, maybe it'll send up a second spike, or a second. Orchids have spikes. Amaryllis bulbs have scapes. So I have a lot of orchids that have, so I have 25 orchids, Phalaenopsis orchids right now that are in spike, getting ready to bloom. So that's a whole nother topic, but the Amaryllis bulbs have flower scapes. So that's what they're called. Well, thank you very much for watching, and hopefully I'll be able to get some updates on these, and you can see the process of how they grow throughout the whole season.